So please sit a little more comfortably if you wish. And welcome to the new faces who have come to put themselves in danger here. So, Stephen, this is on, is it? Yeah, okay. So today is the first evening of Sesshin, and so the door through which we step in every Sesshin is the door of not knowing, of no self, of forgetting the self. And of course the great matter is summed up in the world of Zen in the tiniest non-word that you can find. There is a deep disinclination in Zen to attach sacred meaning to things or words. What is not sacred? What is there that is not sacred? And so we have the word mu, the one syllable mu, which is as close to silence as you can get. But a very rich silence, one that is a revelation of who you really are, what this really is, where we find ourselves, just as we find ourselves. Nothing to improve in this most essential matter of self-nature. Now, some of you will know that Taoism underlies a great deal of what we call Chan, which then, of course, is Zen. Taoism is much older than the axial age in which so many of the sort of great turns in religion rose, including the Mahayana, by the way. Earlier than the Buddha, much earlier, lies this mysterious character, Lao-Tzu. Lao-Tzu is possibly none of the stories about him. We don't know about Lao-Tzu. I think Lao-Tzu did not trouble himself too much to delineate Lao-Tzu. But Lao-Tzu is the putative author of the Tao Te Ching. And when we say Tao, it's another word for way. It is the way, the path. It is also pointing to the way things are at their most natural, in their most natural state, the flow of one thing becoming another, unimpeded. Sometimes it's compared to the waterway, the way the water finds its way, finds no final obstacle. Water finds no obstacle. Water softens any obstacle or goes around it, shapes it to the shape of water in time. So I wanted to have a look at which number was it? Yes. This is the way that Lao-Tzu, in a way, addresses this mystery, this fundamental but very clear mystery we call mu. Look at it, nothing to see, or no thing to see. Call it colourless. Listen to it, no thing to hear. Call it soundless. Reach for it, no thing to hold. What can you possibly hold on to in this life? Call it intangible. Triply undifferentiated, it merges into oneness, not bright above, not dark below. Never, oh never can it be named. To name it is to limit it, is to create a thought in its place. It reverts, it returns to unbeing. Call it the form of the unformed, the image of no image. Call it unthinkable thought. Face it, no face. Follow it, no end. This, by the way, is Ursula Le Guin's translation of the Tao Te Ching, which I like very much because I like Ursula Le Guin very much. And I regret deeply that she died a few months ago. I thought she'd always be here. Well, she is always here now. So this matter of mu, this matter of no-thingness, I'm not saying that mu translates as no-thingness. It's just simply a pointer as to where to not go hunting for it. Don't go hunting for it as a thing. Don't go hunting for it even as the most sacred and wondrous thing. How can you hunt for what you already are? And in a way, Dogen sums up this strange and beautiful Isha-like matter where everything curves back upon itself when he says this: to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. He goes on to describe this forgetting of the self as the great chance for the 10,000 things to advance and confirm this very innermost self-nature before thought can jump in. Thought jumping in is the self going out to try to confirm the 10,000 things, to name, to discriminate, to judge, to elevate one thing, push another down. Great vast equality is another way of speaking of this emptiness that mu invites us to dare to walk into in our practice. So this forgetting the self. Some people, many people actually, when they start to practice, find that to study the self is to be a little horrified by what we find. A little overwhelmed sometimes by the fact that it's not always a pretty sight. Mu doesn't have pretty or unpretty in it. And that's one of the beautiful things about beginning to realize mu. You give up on the attack upon the self. To study the self is not to attack the self for its shortcomings. It is actually to embrace the offer of those apparent shortcomings. If you want to get a vivid picture of this sort of self that we can drag around, I'm using, this came to mind because it comes from a short film that Salvador Dali made back in the silent period of film, called Un Chien Andalou, in other words, the Andalusian dog. And as everyone knows, if you've encountered mu before, there's dogs somehow involved in the whole matter. But in this film, the Andalusian dog, there are no dogs at all. And so it's already quite newish. However, what there is at a certain moment is a scene, I don't know how many people will have seen it, but there's a scene where somebody, a male character in the film, goes over, picks up the traces of something that is suddenly it's found to be in the back of this corner of the room, puts it over his shoulder like this, and starts steadily ploughing forward into the middle of the room. It's very heavy. We don't know why until the camera gradually reveals all the things that he's dragging with him, which includes a grand piano. And I think it has some sort of dead animal lying across it, not a dog. It goes on with all these sort of vast accumulation of strange things, including at one point a priest lying back like this across the traces. He's dragging the Catholic Church with him, apparently. And so it goes. There's this sense of the burden that we can discover we have been dragging around for a long time. So, forgetting the self is, to some extent, it's about lightening up, not just enlightening, but lightening. Mu is the ultimate lightening up. It is open in all directions. The wind blows right through. This self that blossoms in Mu. The mind that is Mu, the realization that is Mu. So here's the case. Jiao, one of the great Tang dynasty masters, possibly, who can judge them, one above the other, but truly one of the most endearing and subtle and always exactly on the point of the question that the questioner presents him with. Not as in giving him the so-called answer, but in responding from this ground of Mu. In other words, inviting the listener on to that ground, the questioner, and us. So in this tiny encounter between a very, very elderly man, he would have been between the ages of 80 and 120. So this questioner asks him, does a dog have Buddha nature? Now, the question is apparently about a dog, but more obviously about himself. How can I, a strange person dragging behind me a grand piano, a cleric, possibly a dead animal lying on top of the grand piano, and many other things, possibly contact my self-nature? Well, Jiao offers him the gate, he says, and it has no barrier. He just gives this one-word response, Mu. Does the dog have Buddha nature or not? Well, Mu comes close to saying no, not, does not have, is not. It's a little like the Heart Sutra, which is full of the word Mu, 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 no, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. It is this beautiful, it would have been probably offered as almost a quiet whisper from a very, very old man. Mu. Allowing all the sounds of the world to pass through that one syllable. And the sounds do pass through, as cries of the world pass through Mu and are completely accepted. It is the most open in all directions kind of matter. So we don't have to worry about dogs. They don't have Mu. Their boundless self-nature, they just simply bypass and go straight to simply being Mu. And that's one of the ways that people fall in love with dogs. So, it's not a matter of trying. The moment you stop trying with any part of practice, including practicing with Mu, practicing deeply, practicing to see into Mu, this mystery that is in front of our eyes at every single point, bright and beautiful at every point. When you're practicing to get past yourself, to break out of the confines of yourself, to forget the self that entraps us so skillfully, the sense of self, the way we make self up, to get past that. If we try, we are creating a very strong sense of self. It's in dropping the trying that the way opens. As Robert Aiken once said in the dojo, if you're not trying to get somewhere, nothing can stop you. The barrier of the self falls away when we stop trying. So really something else is called for here, not trying, but becoming greatly willing. And I'll come back to that point. So how do we practice this? What do you do with no thingness, with something that presents itself as no thing at all? There's a maxim, a strange little utterance, I can only call it, from Franz Kafka that I noticed when I was about 14 or 15 and wrote it down and felt somehow it was pointing very strongly to my life. And I didn't know why, but looking back at it now, I can see just how completely it was pointing the way. But these words of Kafka, are you needing a tissue?
Yep.
Does anyone have a tissue box handy? Or?
I can go and get one from my bag.
These words of Kafka come from a collection called The Great Wall of China, curiously enough. But these are his words. In the context of how do you practice with this no thing at all. He said, you do not have to leave your room. Remain sitting at your table and listen. Do not even listen, simply wait. Be quiet, still, and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. I found that a truly enchanting possibility and somehow familiar. And I think anybody who sat sometime and had those moments when in session perhaps, or even just walking along the street, when suddenly the world does turn over and roll in ecstasy. We roll in ecstasy. That sense of it's not the way we make it up. And if we grow still for long enough, I mean the mind grows still, and in that stillness grow open, and in that openness forget the self. The self drops away, the body and mind, as Dogen puts it, drops away. Then it has no choice. It is vivid, has always been utterly vivid. This seamless quality of everything that we call this thing, that thing, better, worse, condemning ourselves that way to a kind of solitude, or a kind of, more like a kind of exile that is a hard place to be stuck. So that's that is one kind of glimpse of how to keep your feet firmly on the path of a kind of heart-seeking mu practice. Another glimpse is this tiny poem, and I've lost the author, but that's all right. In my room, the world is beyond my understanding. And for the world, you could substitute mu is beyond my understanding. And for room, you could substitute thinking mind. So inside that enclosed space, the world is, and we know this at heart, we're not quite in intimate touch with what this is. We're subtly at odds, at a kind of almost tragic angle off from direct contact. In my room, the world is beyond my understanding, but when I walk, I see that it consists of 3 or 4 hills and a cloud. I love that. I love the fact that suddenly 3 or 4 hills and a cloud is a complete revelation of that which lies beyond the grasp of meaning and is complete. The sense of where do you look for mu? Well, look for it in 3 or 4 hills and a cloud, for example. Look for it in the looking. There's a third one that I've drawn from the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu. He said, "Hold fast to the great thought, and all the world will come to you, harmless, peaceable, serene." So what is this great thought? It's a no thought. It is the no thought of Mu. It is this practice of not knowing. It is the knowing that rises within not knowing. At every point, it's the world before we thought it up, the world beyond what we can think of. In other words, the world just as it is, 3 or 4 hills and a cloud, for example, is Mu. To forget the self, then, is a kind of process of constant discovery. No discovery happens when we do nothing but focus on the self. When that sense of self becomes more soft-edged and transparent, becomes see-through, we see right through it, 2, 3 or 4 hills and a cloud and ferns reflecting in the water beyond the Buddha. We see it there. We see this constant discovery as a seeing into what this is and who this is, not in a fixed way, but in the way of flow, the flowing of the Tao. Everything flows. Everything, each thing is constantly becoming another. This world is one great melting kind of process. So in trying to get beyond the confines of the self, we have to reach towards emptying the self, to discovering the empty self in its empty state, empty of the curse of separation. That curse lifted, body and mind, the sense of self dropped away. Lao Tzu again offers an interesting image. He says, "Where the pot's not is where it is useful." Look at that, where the pot's not. In other words, the hollow inside a vessel is where it's useful. The hollow, the emptiness of the pot, is its great usefulness. So this is a process of undoing and recovering this marvellous, empty, endlessly useful sense of self. Now, to study the self is to forget the self. Within that, it's not a matter of bypassing as best you can the grand piano, the dead thing on top of it, the strange, unaccountable cleric lying there. I wish you could see the image. It goes on in the most extraordinary way, and no one ever comments about any of this. Even though it's not a silent film, there's no reaction to any of this either. But it's not a matter of doing away with the bad parts of yourself. It's not about picking and choosing. The Great Way never was about picking and choosing. It is much more a matter of a complete acceptance. Complete acceptance can't toss things out. There was a Tanto once who gave these words into the dojo in a session. If you can't go through just as you are, you can't go through. If you can't go through the gate of the self, the no self, just as you are, you can't go through at all. So this is saying that all of our strengths and our weaknesses, and that includes physical and mental, emotional matters, honestly met, are gates themselves into this no self, the self-forgotten. They have to be accepted as offers. They're at play in this whole process. They're not a problem so much as an offer, and they shape your own path. They open up your own path. Trusting ourselves is an essential part of forgetting the self. Accepting the self. Until you accept the self, you can't possibly forget it. You've got an ongoing war with it. And it grows stronger and stronger with every attempt to throttle or wrestle it or do away with it. When the Buddha glanced up and was utterly illuminated inexhaustibly by the morning star, he is said to have said words to the effect of, "This is what we've been all along, and only our delusions and attachments can blind us, can keep us at bay, can hold that fact at bay." Forgetting the self is the same as discovering truly, is anything missing now? Forgetting the self is the path of no self, the discovery and the inhabiting of this no self. So, another way of looking at this question of what can I do, how can I work with mu, this strange, elusive matter, when everything is difficult, my knees are aching or my heart is breaking, and add your own story here. Robert Aiken used to tell the story of a ship that it was off the coast of Brazil, about 100 miles or more out from the mouth of the Amazon. And this ship had run out of water. It was a yacht or something like that. It had several people on board. And they'd run out of water and they were desperate, so they signalled their desperation to another ship, which came abreast, and they were saying, no water, holding up the buckets, pouring out and saying, no water, no water. And the people on board the other ship said, "Let down your buckets right where you are." And this is 100 miles out to sea. They let down their buckets and came up with fresh water, the Amazon. And that was a beautiful way of understanding, is a beautiful way of understanding. Let down your buckets right where you are in practice. The fresh matter is always there. Well, if you've read Wu Men's account of working with Mu, his comment on the koan Mu, it's long. It's much longer than any of the other commentaries that he offers. Usually they're short, sharp, and upturning in every possible way. They poke fun at the great matter, and you have to get past yourself and join the fun. But in this case, he gives sometimes it's described as a grandmotherly, meaning very helpful account of ways to work with Mu. I'm not going to read his commentary. You can do that for yourself sometime. I'm going to mention the fact, really, that it is quite strongly, I'd almost want to say, martial in spirit. It refers to saying that when you take on this Mu, it is like swallowing a red-hot iron ball. You want to spit it up, but you can't. You're stuck with it. You must bear down you must grin and bear it. It has a very strong sense almost of beating the self into submission, swallowing Mu as something deeply unpalatable. No, I think that's a misdirection. Sorry, women. I respect you greatly, but here I think he's probably steered a lot of people in the wrong direction. Now, he would have been speaking primarily, or probably purely only to men. And there's a very kind of male energy here in the way he presents it. Samurai kind of spirit. And I think it's created quite a lot of sort of samurai zen, which from a woman's point of view is like something that you might try palely imitating from time to time. And you think, that's not me, I'm not doing that. Forget that. Well, a great figure back in 17th century China called Qi Yuan, a nun. This is how she, in a way, encountered the process of working with this no thing at all, which of course is all that is, all of it. Nothing left out, nothing missing, no edges, nothing bumping into anything else. It's given as a case in The Hidden Lamp, these stories from 25 centuries of awakened women, in which Susan Moon and Florence Caplow sought out the stories that had gone strangely missing from the record. Somehow the experiences of women were not thought very important. Their names could be forgotten. However, the whole effort of scholarship has brought a lot of this back to light. And this is a Chinese nun, and her teacher, Master Shiche, asks her, his student, he says this: Buddha nature is not illusory. What was it like when you were nourishing the spiritual embryo? What is it like when you were working with Mu, when you were nourishing the spiritual embryo? By the way, that is itself a Taoist term, to nourish the spiritual embryo. It's a way of saying deep practice, deep committed, deeply committed practice is to nourish the spiritual embryo. Something is being given birth. Awakening here is being presented as birth. Qi Yuan replied, it felt congealed, deep, and solitary. Now I hope that resonates with you. I hope you've encountered that sense in your own zazen of being in a place that is congealed, deep, and solitary. Congealed is interesting because when things have congealed, you can't find the edges anymore. Deep and solitary, well, that deep and solitary state can be very companionable. What is not your companion when you are truly deep and solitary in your zazen? And I just wanted to read the comment of the woman who commented on this, her reflection, Sunya Kyelde. She says about that response, it felt congealed, deep, and solitary. Anyone who has, even for a moment, found herself in the dark, radiant depths of meditation will recognize at once what this nun is getting at with these few potent words. Congealed, deep, and solitary beautifully hints at this state. And it's a state very close. It's like the threshold of Mu breaking open. The state where the mind finds itself pulled into the very heart of the universe. Only the breathing, only Mu. All sense of myself and the world out there burns up in contact with this powerful force field, she says. It just can't get a foothold there, this sense of myself in here, the world out there. Just has become ridiculous when dark, congealed, dark and solitary state is touched. The encounter goes on. She's then asked, when you gave birth to the embryo, what was it like? In other words, when the matter became radiantly clear, what was it like? She replies, it was like being completely stripped bare. Nothing to hold on to. Look, when we're born, we come bare and naked. When we die, we can take nothing with us. We arrive empty-handed, we leave empty-handed, stripped bare. And then there's this interesting tale to it. When you met with the Buddha, what was it like? She says robustly, I took advantage of the opportunity to meet him face to face. No holding back here, and face to face is beautiful. We're face to face when this heart-mind breaks open. Your teacher then says, good, you will be a model for those in the future. Well, if not a model, at least a kind of an example of how to proceed. And this is not a kind of straining for something. It's not thinking of Mu as something to be attained, as an attainment. A pregnant woman, is that two or one matter? Is this one? Is this two? Already the sense of one being and another is difficult to sort out. Self, no self. What is happening here? So when you're nourishing a spiritual embryo, and just as women have had to think their way into male frameworks for the longest time, it's going on about 100,000 years now, you as men can try, I don't think it's hard, to dream your way a little into this nourishing the spiritual embryo of the earth itself in your deepest core. So, thinking of Mu as something to be attained, as an attainment, is a little bit like that line in Hakuin Zenji about in the midst of water, crying out in thirst. Your self-nature is, the clue is there, it's your self-nature. How can it possibly be sought outside this very matter? It's not somewhere else to go looking. You're swimming in it. So, Latsu, in a section that translates roughly as techniques, interestingly, he then offers in that section a whole series of Mu-like undoings of technique. And in fact, all he offers is questions on the whole, not instructions, but questions, rich questions to live. That's what Zen as a whole offers, is the path of live questions, questions to live. So here are some about techniques of meditation. They're usually undertaken to be a description of ways to offer yourself, give yourself away, forget the self. Can you keep your soul in its body, hold fast to the one, and so learn to be whole? Keeping your soul, your being, in its body is important to have the sense of, I suppose you could say, rich intelligence of the body as your teacher. Vital in this matter of forgetting the self, of daring to give yourself away the way the body itself gives itself away, breath by breath, moment by moment. To exist is to be dying, to be giving yourself away. How strange that holding fast to the one, here we sit between mortality and no birth, no death. That's the one being pointed to here. If I'm not careful, I'll start reciting the Heart Sutra to you, so I'll take care about that. Anyway, this set of instructions, or deconstructions really, of technique in this way. Piercing bright through the cosmos, can you know by not knowing? And then he explains a little. He says, to give birth, to nourish, to bear, and not to own, to act and not lay claim, to lead and not to rule. I'll say them again. To give birth, to nourish, to bear and not to own, to act and not lay claim, to lead and not to rule. And he concludes, this is mysterious power. Now, the day part of Tao Te Ching can translate as power, or strength, or virtue. Virtue, in its oldest sense, does mean strength. And it's the strength of being able to flow, I would say. To go with, to be with, to go with, to move with, to respond with, in the Taoist sense. All right, I'd like to end by taking up the words of a dear student. Some of you know Liz Hearingwell. Liz Hearingwell is profoundly deaf. And she gave herself that name to undo any such nonsense. Now, Liz was part of an online class when she couldn't turn up on one occasion. And I want to read her words in full, because if you want to understand, to know by not knowing, what it might look like in action, to know what it might feel like, to find out how much compassion is born in this forgetting the self. Nowhere else, in fact, is it born. I'd like you to hear the whole very Liz-like account. Oh, this is so rich and interesting. It's clear I was and wasn't there yesterday. I can't make head nor tail of the captions out of context with the recordings, laugh out loud. This discussion here is so rich. And then she says a few things about something that somebody said. Messes and mistakes and ordinary mind unfolding abundantly, and the anxiety and vulnerability when living with the illusion of the troll of wrongdoing, the quest to be the perfect human. Make no mistake, she advises us. By the way, the troll of wrongdoing probably comes from that story that I've told of a troll who lived under a bridge, and anyone who came to the bridge, he'd jump out in front of the cart or the person and say something, say a turning word, or I'll kill you and eat you. Pretty sort of straight up and down manner. And the people, one person after another, was killed and eaten, very matter-of-factly by the troll. But on this one occasion, an old peasant farmer came by with his carriage, his cart full of stuff. Anyway, the troll jumped out in front of him and said, say something or I'll, cut off your head and I'll eat you. The peasant said, look, I've got all this stuff I've got to get to market. The troll said, and waved him through. That was the magic word. They were the magic words needed. The naturally arising, complete, no thought words that came. So here's Liz looking at looking beyond the troll of wrongdoing. So yesterday I didn't arrive at our Sangha gathering online, but I feel like I was living the discussion as it unfolded. About an hour before I was due to arrive at the gathering, I was walking my dog with a friend on the local beach. On the way up, I noticed a young couple. She I knew only by sight as one of the regular all-round swimmers from the local village. He, a former counselling client with their young baby. They were in obvious distress with life, with each other. The young woman, profoundly upset, ran off a ways and curled up in fetal position, sobbing in the sand. The young man cradling the child a little way off, clearly distressed but frozen, clearly uncertain what to do, as was I, my heart wide open for both of them. Yet I could feel myself torn. What are the rules, the ethics, the moral thing to do? Do I step forward? Do I step back? My thinking, feelings, heart, mind, menaced by the troll, possible mistake of right or wrongdoing. Should I offer help or mind my own damn business and walk on? My little self scared to risk the wrath of wrongful intrusion in a private matter, playing out publicly, not wanting to feel some sting of awkwardness, foolish. For a brief time I walked on, heart torn, soon turned back. Father and child had gone off further up the beach, away from her. The young woman had plunged herself into the sea, swimming? Yes, no, maybe. Her despair coming to shore in waves. My friend needed to leave. This is the person she was walking with. I needed to stay. I approached the young man, soothed his wailing son, offering help. He graciously acknowledged this, declined, and said he needed to go. I understood. I squatted in the sand near her clothes, taking them away from the incoming tide. Something in me committed, calmed, not knowing. She swam for a long time, not waving, not drowning, her tears and sobs mingling with the increasing cold wind and waves. Nowhere to put glasses or hearing aid. It wasn't time to wade in. Simply bearing witness, I sat and waited. And when she arrived at the shore, I offered my arms and she threw her shivering, sobbing, wet body into them, and I crouched and pulled her into my lap, where she continued to sob. And I held her and breathed for a long time, the wet sand and sea gradually saturating my trousers. No sign of the troll, eventually drawing and almost carrying her to shelter out of the wind. I eased her wet clothes off, dried her with my top, dressed her like I would a young child, and again sat her in my lap as she continued to shake and sob out her heartbreak for a very long time, not knowing if the shivering was from the cold, at risk of hypothermia or emotional release, simply having to trust this moment. Great clue to not knowing. Trust this moment. Simply to be fully here with her, to breathe, offering few or no words, until her sobbing, lamenting and shaking slowed, wiping the snot pouring from her nose with my sleeve. She looked into my eyes and we laughed. We breathed. I continued to hold her, my dog resting her head in our laps, breathing with us, just this breath for a long while. Our leaving time, unspoken, arrived, and magically, in the fading light, we did find my walking stick, somehow dry where I'd left it at the shoreline. She, now calm, tired and cold, anxious to get home to feed her baby and have a hot bath, now supporting me. Semi-night blind, back up the beach to her car, and a ride home to my friend's house. A change of trousers, a warm drink. Too late for the gathering. A perfect mistake. And she completes this by saying, so blessed to bear witness to all this ordinary, magnificent, painful, joyous life. I, as in AYE, So there it is. There is not knowing as the most natural action, able to find the most natural and healing, making whole action. I think it is a wonderful example of dropping down the bucket right where you are and finding what is fresh. So please risk this not knowing. It is the most valuable risk you'll ever take. Even if you have to take it over and over as things grow cloudy again, then they grow clear, they come, they go, this clarity, these moments of clarity. But when we hold ourselves firm, when we have the containment of practice, we really can let go. When we hold body and mind trustingly and trustfully, we really can let go and arrive at last where we've always been, but know it for the first time. So thank you for letting me trouble you with such no news at all.